Hi, this is Craig Lane with Health Alchemy Video Blog, week 8 of 2013. Welcome to our West Coast spring, early it seems that. And today I'm going to talk about something called growth factors versus natural tissue antibodies that Dr. Royal Lee, the founder of Standard Process Incorporated, spoke of many years ago. He was one of many men back around the 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s that really spoke about nutrition in terms of actual identifiable things that we can use in common language, and also in terms of things that work. And there were sort of like a lot of men, like back in the Renaissance, that were genius and like people ahead of their time. A lot of what they talked about was misunderstood. And so today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about misunderstood things that are actually, you put a name on something like a growth factor, he termed it a protomorphogen. And there was someone more recently, I just can't remember his name, and he called it Ormus. And it doesn't matter what you label anything, but there are growth factors that cause cells, tissues to grow, and then there are tearing down factors, such as in the bone we have the osteoblast that causes bone cell to grow, or bone tissue to grow, and then we have the osteoclast that tears it down. And in Chinese medicine we call that yin and yang, or the opposing forces of the universe, such as I have a top and I have a bottom. I have a beginning and I have an end. I have a left and a right side. I have both love and fear that I feel. I have expansive tendencies and contractive tendencies. And they label that as yin and yang, but you could very well label it as alpha, beta, or alpha, omega, or nonsense terms. It doesn't really matter what you place the label upon it, just that we're identifying forces at work in the world. So when Royal Lee was speaking of protomorphogens, he's talking about a blueprint. So like the DNA is sort of a hard drive of the cell. It tells it how to replicate itself. The DNA, or the nucleus of the cell, is not the brain of the cell, as has been misunderstood in the past. That the brain of the cell is actually in the membrane, or the outer part. And so when we have a blueprint growth factor, so to speak, that says make healthy liver cells, make healthy bone cells, make healthy eyes, make healthy tongue, make healthy hair, make healthy shoulders, make healthy whatever we label that upon. He believed that it was common to all mammal tissue, so you could extract the liver out of a cow or a pig, so on and so forth, out of any mammal, and extract out its protomorphogen, or as he put it, a protein mineral template that sort of has the codes of how to make these things, and that's what he put together. And he put these things together back in the 1940s and 50s, and so after all these years of actual clinical empirical evidence, we see that they work. And now I'm going to talk about how it actually does work. So as we're growing when we're young, for example, our bones grow, all of our organs grow, and my question is, what makes them stop? Something has to make our cells stop growing, or we would just keep going and going and going. Something has to keep our bones from overly growing, otherwise our bones would grow too large. We would just become, you've heard the word giganticism, and giganticism is nothing more than someone whose growth factors exceed their tearing down factors. So many of us in health have heard the word autoimmune. Well, autoimmunity is nothing more than the tearing down factors in the body have gone haywire for various reasons. So what the body does is when, say I had a client once that he's dead now because he had liver cancer, but previously he had 90% of his liver removed, and within a year his liver had completely regenerated. Just like when I was a child, I was fascinated with like seeing a lizard that had had its tail removed and then seeing it regrow. And So it is in our bodies that certain organs can regenerate. Not all of them, but many of them can. I myself an example of a guy that I have a pretty severe concussion 3 years ago, and I also had a broken neck, and I watched my nerve function slowly return after the broken neck 26 years ago. And I could say that I actually turned out better in the long run because of what happened, because I was humbled by the experience and physically basically made it out of it 99% corrected. In the concussion, I was actually back at work 8 days later because of all those years of therapy and working with people. I understood how to correct the situation much more quickly. So what makes our cells stop growing is these tearing down factors, and the body actually produces antibodies to the growing tissue. So the man with the liver, for example, there's a point where his body said, okay, we can't have this liver grow any larger because it'll interfere with the other tissues around it. So it began to produce antibodies to the growth of the liver. And so the liver itself had what Royal Lee termed a natural tissue antibody, or to put it simply in English, a tearing down factor. So there's growth occurring and there's tearing down occurring. And when we see someone that's being torn down, like in a lot of our degenerative quote-unquote illness, often what we're seeing is that we have damaged, necrotic, or diseased or overly inflamed tissue where the cells themselves have spilled their DNA or their blueprints into the bloodstream, which our body cannot work with. That's what we see in a lot of illness, especially in endometriosis, where the uterine DNA has been spilled out into the bloodstream, and now we have uterine tissue being made elsewhere in the woman's body, which causes a lot of congestion, scarring, damage, etc., and pain. So as it is, the body will say, okay, we have a lot of dead tissue blueprint floating around in the bloodstream. That's what our immune system, one of its jobs is to do, is to clean up that waste and to identify or follow the trail back to where the problem occurred. So imagine you have a garbage can with your name on a series of letters that you've thrown out, and then the wind blows the top off the garbage can and the letters begin to fly around the neighborhood. Well, someone's likely to take those letters back, if they can, to your property and identify you and get to the source of the cause, which is, oh, your garbage can lid's open, let's put it back on and put the papers back in. In this case, the immune system traces the problem back to the resulting organ and actually can and will begin to attack it. We hear the word Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis. That's basically an immune attack on the thyroid because of the thyroid tissue is spilling into the bloodstream. If we have damaged gut cells from leaky gut, we may have actually an attack on our own gut cells, and so on and so forth. People that have concussions and head injuries, you see this in football players and fighters, their immune system is actually inhibiting the repair of the brain because there's dead necrotic brain tissue, and the immune system is saying, we can't have this spilling into the bloodstream, we'd better tear that down, that system down, and correct this. But meanwhile, the body's trying to heal, so it's like you have half of your house burning down while you're trying to repair the other half that's been burned. And what corrects that, what Dr. Royal Lee found in standard processes, these protomorphogens would act as a decoy for the immune system to work on those, the product itself taken on an empty stomach, and then the dying or diseased tissue could begin to heal finally because the immune isn't interfering with this. And over time, that's what drew me to this company, was the amazing reports from direct observation of people that oftentimes, like lung tissue where there's pneumonia, bronchitis, whatever, there's often lung DNA floating around and the immune system is actually attacking the lung. So a couple of these tablets sometimes can alleviate a chronic cough or chronic lung issues that haven't really healed. And you see someone with a chronic cold and flu where in Chinese medicine we say, oh, it's half in, half out. They get better for a few weeks and then they're down again. They get better for a few weeks and then they're down again. And that's basically because the immune system is inhibiting the repair of the tissues. So to sum it all up in a nutshell, I think that we could look at anti-aging therapy as actually encouraging growth factor more than we're encouraging tearing down of tissue. And that's where detoxification actually comes into play, and that's why I lead group cleanses and individual cleansing programs. But I saw it in my own life. And there's those physicians that I'll probably do an upcoming video blog on, and maybe even a newsletter, that they believe that anti-aging is anti-parasite therapy. So if we have, remember, in my world, the parasite is anything that could be, doesn't have to be a worm in our gut. It could be fungus that's overgrown, or bacteria that's overgrown, or viruses that have overgrown their place. Just like if a tree overgrows, then the surrounding plants around it are not going to get the nourishment and light that they need. And just like a candida overgrows, it can become parasitic. Because in my world, all things have a place. Fungus has a job in nature and in our bodies. Viruses have a job, bacteria have a job, and so we look at anti-aging as anti-parasite therapy. So this also ties in with dead and dying tissue. If we have things living in us that are eating our own cells and causing problems, then we often see a need to get them out, or sort of prune the tree, so to speak. So that's sort of a sneak preview for upcoming video blogs, and I really wanted to sum this up in a nutshell, is that we want to encourage a balance between growth and tearing down, because if we overgrow, then we can cause problems with the tissue around it. And that's where another thing we're doing in Health Alchemy is a brain protocol, now identifying parts of the brain that may not have ever been fully developed or may have been damaged and now are being inhibited by healing, and really getting the processor up here, or the thermostat, working so it can identify, because this is what makes the balance ultimately. It's constantly sensing what hormones are in and around, what tissues need to be repaired, how to change the pH of the blood in the tissues, electrical signals, so on and so forth, heart rate, respiratory rate, so on and so forth. So really, I'm going to sign off now by saying, let's look at balance, and you can reach me via healthalchemy.com, HEALTHALKEMY.com, and I'm always available for online visits via Skype, phone, email, and in person is most ideal. And really, we can see a lot of this in the iris via iridology, sclerology, and some of the assessment methods I use. It's not, in my world, it's not necessarily rocket science. It's just getting down to making slow, gradual changes, and then we see these things even out all in of themselves. Because as I have seen over and over again, what a famous Zen master once said, everything is perfectly managed in the unborn. Everything is already being perfectly managed, and how can we get out of the way of normal tissue and healing? By providing nourishment and being able to assist drainage of toxins and waste that are naturally part of a human system. Craig Lane signing off with Health Alchemy. Have a beautiful day.